I'm here for the European Young Bar Association conference put on by the Northern Ireland Young Solicitors Association. Nobody I think expected it to be this popular, probably not even Netflix, to be honest. I did see a preview the week before it came out, and I knew it was good. I knew it was gripping. It's amazing to me that it had the kind of interest it has. I was one of the two attorneys who were representing Mr. Avery in the Teresa Halbach homicide trial. We took over the case about 3.5 years after he was charged. 3.5 months, I should say. He had had other attorneys representing him before then, and then Dean and I were hired and took over and represented him up through the trial. It's really not accurate at all, because obviously there was bits of both cases left out of the documentary. This was a 6-week trial, and I don't fault the filmmakers for what they chose. Dean and I had no editorial control on what did or didn't end up in the final documentary, but the one thing that the prosecutors who criticize them now, which is really sour grapes if you ask me, they chose not to participate in the project. But what they've omitted is that those pieces of the prosecution's case that were left out, there was also the defense response to those pieces that was left out. And in the end, they were largely neutralized at the trial, to the extent where even in the closing argument, just to pick one example, the supposed DNA on the hood latch, by the end of the case, the prosecutor spent only about a half a page of his hundreds of pages of hours and hours of closing argument on that point, because their own witnesses had admitted that it could have been transferred by the analyst who was working inside the car and then failed to change his gloves before he opened the hood latch. So those are just really, I think, misrepresentations and unfair representations about the way the case went down. The majority of the really hotly disputed pieces of evidence were covered for both sides. When I look at the evidence as a lawyer in my 35 years of practice, there was certainly an abundance of reasonable doubt about his guilt. And when you look at the lack of motive, to the suspicious evidence that appeared magically after the key in the 7th search of his bedroom when it wasn't there before, when I look at all of it together and see the gentleman that I saw in my representation, I don't have any difficulty in saying personally I think he's innocent. I'm hoping that his new attorney can present newly discovered evidence and get it reopened and either a new trial or the real killer, real perpetrator be discovered. There had been a lot of tips, some of which came directly to Dean and I, and we've forwarded on to the new attorney. I'm not privy to what information she has or what her strategies may be in terms of attempting to get a new trial for him. But it is difficult in America especially once the direct appeals are concluded, it's difficult to get a case reopened, but I'm optimistic that he will. There's no contest. Episode 8, the verdict and the waiting. When any trial attorney will tell you that once the jury goes out, while your work is done, most of your efforts, at least unless there's some other questions that come up, your efforts are ended and it's now in their hands. You still get this different kind of anxious, nervous pit in your stomach. And particularly when you're told that the verdict is in and you have to assemble everybody, it takes an hour or so to get back to the courthouse. Those are hard to relive, and particularly though when it's, in this case, when the verdict was announced, I was very disappointed. I knew he was extremely disappointed. I think I put my hand on his back to try and buck him up a little bit. But what I didn't see until I saw the documentary were his eyes, because I was standing next to him, and in the documentary the camera is coming back and you can see his eyes kind of welling up, and he's very emotional about it, and that was very difficult for me to have to see.
The truth always comes out.